Hello everybody and welcome to Transatlantic Watch Party, where I, Cara, and my friend Dan watch a show separately, together, sort of stuff. And he is in Canada and I'm in the UK, and we are currently watching Pan Am. And this week we are discussing Pan Am episode 13. Or is it episode 7? And that's going to be our major discussion, I think. And the episode is called Romance Languages. Now, Dan, you said to me, because this was meant to be episode 7, and they moved it with no explanation as to why they've dropped it into later in the series. And you said to me that you had a theory.
Yeah.
Does your theory have anything to do with the Grammys?
Is that what was competing with it at the time?
That was what was on the week they actually showed this episode.
Oh, I thought it was the Oscars. I looked up some other thing and I saw, Grammys. Okay. So I think part of what it was, because this is very clearly, and it's just so obviously taken out of that story arc, that mid-season story arc that we had, episode 6. I guess there was 6, 7, 8, like there's a couple episodes involving Ginny. We remember, of course, this episode involves Ginny, brings her back. And I think when you look at it in the space of the entire 14 episodes, it's probably the worst episode. Like, it's not a great episode overall. It wasn't very exciting. It was kind of had this weird thing with this kid going on, like all this. It was not a great overall. So I think that at the time when this is airing on TV and ratings were not great, and they were concerned, they wanted to make sure ratings were good. Somebody at the network didn't like this episode, thought it was crappy, and didn't air it when it was supposed to air, and instead tried to hide it in behind the Grammys. That's what they do. They air this stuff. They figure nobody's going to be watching it. It'll be on, it'll air, it'll be over and done. But now, of course, in the age of streaming, everything is available that's ever been made. Hi, Auntie. And it's like, you can't, this is how it's been preserved as far as like the order of its actual air dates, right? That's how they usually do it.
What is really weird, I was thinking that maybe, this was, what's the word that Michael Hobbs uses? Nothing burger. This was a whole nothing burger of an episode.
Yeah.
Because other than the Ginny situation, it wasn't really tying anything up. It didn't really do anything. But, so I wondered if they'd sort of looked down the line and gone, oh shit, that week is the Grammys. And that is the week that we should be airing the episode where Kennedy gets shot. And we can't have that episode on when no one's going to be watching it because everyone's watching the Grammys.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So that would have been Yeah, that could be it, I guess. My feeling is that somebody thought that nobody else would be, like, when you put something up the Grammys, these big TV events, an old school TV producer person would be thinking in terms of like live. They only care about live viewers. They really do. And so like they would think that nobody was watching. And it was a low rated show. Like, it was not doing well in the ratings. So they figured, okay, well, we're just going to dump this episode here. It's happened. Firefly is another TV show that famously the episodes were aired out of order. Similar reasons. And then the other one, it's actually, I was talking about this on our podcast a few weeks ago, Perfect Strangers. I've been watching that, and it's really like weird how like they take something to happen. It's kind of like ahead of its time in that it does tie in things from episode to episode, which doesn't usually happen in 80s sitcoms. They're pretty self-contained, but it does have these weird things where like Larry wins a photo contest, but then like 3 episodes before that, they were going to a benefit gala for the photo contest that he won, but he hadn't won it yet. Like, that's how stuff, little minor details. Nothing as major as this. This was a major shift. Like, they went from Kennedy being shot to like, now everything's fine, and what is going on? And like, it was just completely, right? Anybody who was a loyal watcher of the show was very confused. I guarantee that whenever this aired. Right?
We had, I watched Lucifer with a couple of friends of mine. We had that situation, I think it was season 3, which was when they were dropped and then it got picked up by Netflix to carry on. And so it's the final episode of season 3 is an absolute banger of an episode, and we get the big reveal and it's all very exciting. And then on Netflix, which is what we're watching it on now, they show the random episode that they'd filmed for season 3 and never showed. And they show it as though it's after that final episode. And the big thing, no one's talking about it, no one's referencing it at all. And we were like, what happened? And so we were all watching it, just desperately Googling, why on earth? And yeah, it was just an episode that they dumped. And they were like, oh, we'll just stick it at the end of the season. Yeah. What's interesting, though, is I was looking it up, and New Zealand, when they acquired the show, they showed them in the right order, but they were the only country that did.
Well, good for New Zealand and good for Apple TV as well, because here's what happened to me, and this is where I noticed it, is when I started watching this, I've been watching it on a couple different platforms, but it was on the Sundance Now channel, which I had to subscribe to through Prime. You know how like these services have like other little things you can subscribe to through, right? So that's how it works. So I subscribed to this through Prime, did my free trial there, and then I had used the Internet Archive. I used YouTube for an episode at one point, and then I realized that I'm on Apple TV Plus now. I've got a free trial going for that, and Apple TV also allows you to subscribe to AMC Plus and Sundance Now, all these little other channels. So I got another free trial of AMC Plus. I got a second free trial. This is a little half for you. And so I've been using that as to watch the rest of Pan Am, but it's in the right order here. I checked today to make sure it is not in the right order on Prime, but it is in the right order on Apple TV. So I don't know. Yeah.
And so, I mean, unfortunately, that means that because the only place I found a reference to it was the first place I found a reference to it was Wikipedia. Because when you go onto IMDb, it's listed as episode 13 because it was aired originally as the 13th episode. But when you go into the summary of what happens in the episode, they use the summary of episode 12. So I was confused all over again. So I went to Wikipedia, and they've got very good, very detailed episode things. So I didn't want to read what was going to happen in the episode. And right at the bottom is a thing that says, note, this episode was moved. So I hadn't found it anywhere that they were moving it. And so most of my notes are, what the hell is happening?
Oh, no. I clued in pretty early on that it was like a misplaced. I mean, obviously it was in episode 7 in my listing, right? And I messaged you about it, but yeah, that would be like, again, you were in the position of that viewer who was sitting at home with the night this first aired going, what is going on? Why are we back to Ginny? And then what I also realized while watching this episode is that we never really got a wrap up of Ginny, and I didn't really care. Like, I didn't even notice when Ginny went away because we didn't care about Ginny or any of that stuff. So to have this episode kind of centered on her and all that stuff, and then we finally, of course, get the photos or the origin of the nude photos. So we do get that scene, which we had a cut or we had a clip of in the last previously on. So it's so messed up. It's just a big mess.
Yeah.
But
that was the bit I was waiting for because again, I was watching it downstairs, big telly, living room, and I was watching it with my headphones on, and my mum was like just reading her book or whatever, and I kept going, what is happening, like out loud. So she got kind of invested in what this crazy experience that I was having, and I said to her, I'm just waiting to see if we see that scene that had been in the previously on, and then it came up and I was like, there you go, Mom, there it is. This is definitely in the wrong order, because the first thing we see to get into the actual episode is Laura at the gallery that we later find out is this. I think it was the same gallery, even.
I think so. Yes, yeah.
That she ends up in as a nude model, and she's looking at all these nude photos, and the photographer is there, and I wrote down, "Hello, bad photographer man," because I hadn't twigged yet. I did twig, like, you know, by the third scene, because you'd said about it being listed as episode 7 somewhere else.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I was just like, what? Because she seemed so into these, and then when she was saying like, oh, they're so brave, I was like, she hasn't done this yet.
Yeah,
this is
exactly
odd.
Yeah, and I noticed the photos are mostly of men. They're like nude of men. I didn't know if there were any women in there. And it was everybody
because she said these girls are so brave, and he said they're not girls, they're women.
But he'd also invited all the stewardesses, all the crew, to the, like, Maggie was there. I don't know if anybody else was there, but Maggie was there definitely.
I think we saw Colette at the very beginning as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and so they're there because he was the life guy who was taking photos of them while they were on their trip or whatever they did a few episodes back. And so then Laura goes home with this guy, right? And then we get to this big thing about she's a virgin and she's nervous about her first time. And that's something, again, this kind of, I imagine you were very confused. This is probably one of those times where you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Uh,
I was like, wait a second. Did she lie to Ted? Did she not sleep with Joe? It definitely looked like she was going to sleep with Joe. But no, she hadn't lied to Ted.
That would have been, did that come after this? That did come after this, right? The thing with Joe? Like if it had aired in the 7th episode, Joe would have been after that.
Episode 8 is Joe.
Okay.
So when she has, skipping ahead, but when she has that lovely sisterly moment with the statue with Kate, and she's like, oh, it'll happen when it happens, and you just have to trust your gut. The next episode, she meets Joe. And that makes sense, plot-wise, you know.
And it would have had so much more meaning for us, like to know that he was her first, because there was no indication during that whole thing with Joe that she hadn't had sex before, right? I didn't see him, and I don't think they were meant to making a big deal out of it, but it was like, yeah, that would have been so much more interesting. Anyway, okay, so that...
Yeah, and also I think what's one of the other things that's interesting is that she says that these people are brave. These photos that she sees, she thinks they're incredibly brave. And this was, I know Laura is still working out who she is, like later on in the series, but this was in prime Laura trying to figure out who she is territory.
Yeah.
And she says those people are brave. And what she does at the end of the episode, she's not brave enough to have sex. And so at the end of the episode, she thinks, I'll be brave enough to take my clothes off for some photos. But then the next episode with Joe, she is brave, you know, in a really different way. And I think that's sort of like this thing of her becoming braver in different ways, like getting more committed to her photography, actually setting up a dark room. You know, she's becoming brave, and she's realised it doesn't have to be about taking her clothes off. But then if Andy Warhol wants her to take her clothes off, then why wouldn't she?
Yeah, that's right. He's a famous artist. Yeah. And
I was disappointed for Laura that this episode was out of order, but other than that, it didn't matter.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It does give us way more depth into Laura's character. One thing I think it does, and then maybe was another thing behind the decision to move it, was I think it actually, like, Dean and Colette, they kind of got them flirting with each other a little bit before this, I think, and they were kind of setting something up. But in this episode, like, Colette very clearly states, because she has this little boy who's got a crush on her, a very creepy little boy, as it turns out, who's got a crush on her, and she states there's nothing between them. Oh no, she says that to somebody else, right? That was to Ginny. Ginny, yeah, there's nothing between us, right? Because Ginny was very jealous. And I think this episode puts more distance between them. I think it, like, they were moving closer and closer together, and this, like, kind of set them back a bit. So maybe that was one of the reasons why they also cut it, just because it was, like, honestly, we didn't miss it. We didn't miss this episode. It moved from one to the other, and we could have not had it at all, and we would never have noticed, right?
Yeah. So, and I feel for it, because, like, as an episode, I feel bad for the episode, just in terms of, like, if it had been where it was, fine. Do you know what I mean? But the show has been ramping up in momentum. And then to drop this nothing confusion of an episode without telling anyone, just don't air it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, again, you have the Grammys situation, and they've moved the other one forward, so you've had Kennedy getting shot. You can't then show the next episode when the Grammys are on. So they wanted to fill it with something. Just put a repeat on of something else. Do you know what I mean?
That's what they used to do, by the way. In the old days, they used to just run a rerun, and they would do that frequently when they were up against big events like the Grammys or the Oscars or stuff like that. They would just run a rerun, and that was fine. People didn't care. And these days, I don't think anybody's watching terrestrial television anymore, but I think that, you know, like, at the time they were still caring about this. This is like, what, 14 years ago. So they did care about it back then. But it would mean nothing. And I think, you know, the episode's fine. If you watch this series, I would hope, like, there's a warning. I guess on Wikipedia there's a warning, but not till the end. Like, I wish I'd known this up front. I wish I'd known this up front. I would have skipped ahead, watched that, and come back to episode 8 and gone, you know what I mean? It would have been so much better.
Yeah, if I'd read that piece of information online before we'd started watching the entire show, we would have watched this as episode 7, as it should be. And it just it kind of ruins the whole thing.
Well,
because
but
only because then you sort of go, well, it was already maybe drifting in the ratings, and then they did this to it, and I feel like this was maybe the nail in the coffin.
That's a very good point. You're right. I think you're absolutely right about that. This is like, again, imagine you are a loyal viewer. You've been watching the show from the beginning and you love it. And people really do feel like an attachment to these shows, right? They're like, this is my favorite show. I like this. I'm going to watch it every week. I'm making appointment television to watch it. And then this drops and you're like, what the fuck? And then the next episode, fuck it, I'm not watching this and I'm not going to bother with this show. They just had this weird episode where they did a bunch of stuff that they went back in time. They're not going to talk about the Kennedy assassination, apparently. And I'm going to do something else next weekend. And the people drop off. And then that last episode probably didn't get as many viewers, right? That final 14th episode.
Because they just didn't explain it to anyone. And I really feel like this sort of, this killed it. And I think that's really sad because I don't want this show to be killed because I've been really enjoying it. So yeah, just to get back to the episode, because this is just also confusing. We see Nico with Kate.
Yeah.
And again, I was like, oh, Nico's, and I wrote down, oh, I thought they were never going to see each other again, so I'm happy. And then I was like, no, this is all a lie. And
I was happy to see him again, though. I'll say that actor, I liked him in the role. It was great to see him back, and they're lovey-dovey again. So like, right still before she breaks up with him.
They were so cute. Oh. Yeah. But he did say something that I liked. He said, Croatia is better than all of Europe combined, and Croatia is so beautiful.
All right.
It's gorgeous, Croatia. It's somewhere I've never been. It's somewhere I was planning to go before I got sick. And I've never been. And it's just such a beautiful country, Croatia. So I don't think he's wrong. And then Kate says, we have freedom here. We have decency. And I was like, what are you talking about? Someone just assassinated your president. Except they didn't.
Exactly, right. That's right.
I mean, I suppose that's the ultimate form of freedom. People here are free to assassinate our president.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then we skipped to Ginny, and then I obviously got really angry, and I'm sure you can understand why, because I thought it meant that Dean had still been seeing Ginny when he was seeing Colette.
Oh my God, that would have been awful.
Yeah, for me, I was going to kill him. But he wasn't, because none of this happened.
It's almost like it's an alternate reality, right? It's like this is like an alternate timeline where someone made a different choice, and these are the results of these choices.
This is the sliding doors episode.
But it's but it's weird. Like I feel like even if it was like if we watched it in the order, Ginny's character took a sharp turn in this episode. Like she just became so much more obsessed with him. I didn't get that sense before. That's what she was. Like I thought she was just again having fun. She's just there for, and I think she did. There was a scene where she did say "I love you," and he was like, "Oh," and I just took that as meaning, oh, she's just a little she's getting too much too soon, and that was it.
I'm sorry. Right? Just your impression of Dean was so good. She was like, "I love you," and he was like,
well, that's Dean, right? But that's like. Then and then in this episode we come back to it and she's like, I told you I love it, and you keep saying I'm sorry. Like he can't say I love you back when he doesn't, and he's not gonna lie to her. And so he tells her, like, in New York it's over, flat out says it's over. They go to Rome, and then they come back, him and Colette are coming in. Oh yeah, and we'll talk about the 12-year-old later in a second. That's the other thing. They come back to Rome and Ginny's there, and oh my God, she just shows up in Rome and she's in the lobby. But it's so funny because she hears them laughing about something, and it's just like, fuck, what is going on here? This is so crazy. This is just, I'm swearing a lot today. I know this. I don't know why. Sorry.
And that annoyed me because it gave Ted the opportunity to be like, oh, all women are crazy. It's just, you get to decide which level of crazy you're willing to settle for. And I was just like, I hate you, Ted, just shut up. And then she was crazy, and I was like, don't prove Ted right. This is never a good move.
That was the best line of the episode. I'm sorry. Ted laughed. I laughed so hard. No, they're all crazy. You just have to choose which level crazy. Like, that's Ted. That's Ted in a nutshell right there. Yeah, that was great.
Ted, don't marry the fun ones.
Right.
And he goes,
then,
"Oh, the crazy ones are fun." So that's what he thinks that this is the same
right.
thing, you know.
Yeah. So
Um,
then we have this 12-year-old boy who's traveling. What's his name again? Uh,
Charles.
Charles. Yeah, Charlie. I think she calls him. And he's like it's like a in transcontinental divorce. Where one parent lives in States, one parent lives in Europe. I guess Italy. I guess is where he's going. Right, Rome. So he's traveling by himself, and he's very like into Colette, and he's very mature for his age as well. I'll say that about him, right? Like he's
In
very
some
sophisticated for
elements,
culture.
yes, in some ways.
Yeah.
And when he first meets them, he shakes Dean's hand, and because Colette's going to look after him on the flight, and he steals his watch, and I was like, oh, he's a gentleman thief.
I thought he could give Kate a few lessons in pickpocketing, right? Because she was so trying so hard last time. But wait, that hadn't happened yet.
No, no. But if they'd had Kate looking after him on the flight, she might have learned a few things. Could have been useful. That's very true. Yeah, and yeah, because this was sort of the episode about stalkers. You know, because we had Ginny.
I guess so, yeah.
Charlie. Because Charlie just kept getting creepier by the minute.
Don't you think it was weird? So they're on the flight, and that's fine. She's got to be. And I know how that works, right? If you're minor on a flight, they're responsible for you, right? And so, and it's understandable that a 12-year-old boy would have a crush on Colette and want to, and he's probably like the girls probably love it. He's very sophisticated. It's probably a big hit with the other 12-year-old, right? That kind of stuff. But of course she's like, you know.
I don't know. I feel like Charles is the kind of person who doesn't have any friends.
Oh no, you're right. Yes, that's right.
He's into most magic, and you know, I just feel like the poor boy
he has a lot of time
surrounded by everyone.
Has that. He said he has a lot of time to himself. That's right. And he practices his magic. He's got all these things he can do. And so, but I thought the weird part was when they land the flight and they're arguing with the housekeeper who's been sent to pick him up because the mom doesn't know he was coming. The dad didn't tell the mom. This is so awful. I'm like, oh my God, these are like the worst parents ever. This situation is like just a nightmare for him. So the housekeeper's there to pick him up, but they can't legally. I knew they would, but they're having an argument because they're supposed to give him to the mother, not to the housekeeper. And so out of that comes Dean asking him to go out for dinner with them. I thought that was weird.
It's so
out of that
weird.
Very strange thing. Like Colette's looking at him like, why don't you ask him? Just go come out with us. Yeah, have a 12-year-old kid hang out with some adults. Like that's just weird.
That came out of so left field for me because I was just like, I thought Colette was just going, "Aw, isn't it sad?" And then Dean was like, and I was like, "What are you? What? This is absolutely bonkers."
Yeah.
So, yeah, that didn't sit right for me. That because plot element was very weird.
And then Dean, of course, has to bow out because Ginny has a moment, and I did not see that coming. I thought something. Okay, so let me ask you what you thought was going to happen in that moment when he's telling her again, we are not. In no uncertain terms, we're not together. I'm not going to be with you.
I thought something like that might happen in terms of she might go away and take a bunch of pills or something because she was wearing mourning, like she was in all black. She had black gloves on. She looked like she was going to a funeral, and it gave off the vibes that it might be her own, you know. But I didn't expect her to put her own head through a window.
I expected her to jump out of the window. I thought she might jump out of the window, like as like I'm so because I thought, well, I mean, open it up and jump out. Or just jump through the glass. But either way, I thought that might be the thing. I did not expect her to just smash her face through the window and then cut herself up and be all like mangled. Like it's pretty rough. And it's like, and it didn't even give us any break. It's like we go right from that to the scene where she's in the hospital and Dean's there, and again he says, she's like, "I love you," and he says, "I'm sorry," and then she's like, right away, so you're still gonna be leaving me now? Like this was not worth it. I'm like,
yeah.
What part of that did you think was gonna work? Like it's so weird.
I was very proud of Dean. I was very proud of Dean in this moment, because it feels like the easiest thing to sort of try and placate someone and be like, you know, but it doesn't work out for either of them. So I was very proud of him for not saying "I love you" just to sort of get her to shut up. Even back in New York, you know, just being genuine and like, this was never anything for me. And then we'll talk about the guy that turns up, the VP guy that turns up later, because he does a classic thing that I absolutely detest. But can we just go back to the plane ride for a moment? Because what we haven't discussed is that they're flying to Rome, and there's a bunch of clergy, and there's a load of nuns on the plane. Right. And also on the plane is a honeymooning couple who cannot get their tongues out of each other's mouths, and then go to join the Mile High Club. And it's so funny. And Laura is in this situation because Maggie's like trying to get her to talk about the sex that she had last night, and Laura hasn't told her that she didn't have sex last night. And so she's sort of, she's kind of embarrassed by herself, you know. And there's a point where she's trying to get the couple out of the toilet. And the nun says, "Can you not do this? Do you want me to have a word?" And I was like, well, first of all, yes, nuns are terrifying, you know. But then Laura's like, "No." And she walks off. And I was like, "Why are you going to the part? What are you doing?" And she went, "We need some turbulence." Fake turbulence. Absolutely brilliant. I didn't know they could do that.
No, I'm sure they could. But that's, I wonder if that was a common tactic when it came to people trying to do the Mile High Club at those kind of situations. It was interesting because she was so embarrassed by the whole thing. And I wasn't quite cluing into, because they kind of showed us her story in flashbacks, right? And so we didn't quite know, I think at that point, that she hadn't had sex. So there was like just like this thing about it. And she was like embarrassed because the nuns are there. And she kept leaving. Like I thought it was weird. She's like, "I'll be right back." And she goes. I'm like, what is she going to do? Like, I don't understand why she didn't just say, "Hey, stop making out," like right there, then and there. There's a nun right there. Like, it's all you have to say. Or God can see you. Say something like that, you know? Like,
what? Somebody had a great thing. Oh, so they said, Maggie, was it Maggie? At least they'll be able to confess their sins immediately. No, it was Colette. Colette said that. At least they'll be able to, and that was brilliant. And then Ted was like, "Sins? Where?" So I was like, "Oh, Ted."
That's good, man. Yeah.
So that was a very funny Ted moment. We didn't have much Ted, but it was good Ted, you know. Mm-hmm. And so and at that point, because the first time we see Maggie ask her about it, she looks very sort of dewy-eyed, and I was like, did he attack her? That's where I was going with it. I thought something awful happened.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
It didn't. Just her self-esteem took a hit by her own actions. She was just like, why can't I just do this? Why am I making such a big deal of this? You know. So yeah, that was. So we had the Mile High Club and the fake turbulence, and then Ginny being in Rome. Oh yeah, and then we got the situation with Kate, and this is where it got really confusing, because at this point in the show, in the order that they've been shown, Kate is now officially a spy, whereas at that point she was still just a courier. And as somebody knocks her to the ground, she is like 5 feet away from her sister and Maggie. Somebody knocks her to the ground, says something to her, and then walks away. And I mean, I'm sure they did, but we don't see Maggie and Laura go and help her. I was just like, and then she's like curled up in the floor of a phone booth, you know, on the phone to Richard, you know, going, has my cover been blown? I don't want to end up like Bridget, which again, weird, because Bridget's back.
Yeah, so much of this episode does not work with everything else, right? It's just so funny. Yeah, and so she has got to this guy tells her to stay away from Nico. Basically, he says he just stay away from Nico Alonso, and he like gives her a shove, and she thinks her cover's blown. But I think it's just because, like Richard said, they don't want him falling in love with an American woman, right? They don't want him loving capitalist America and going over to their side or something like that.
Is there any level on which this might be a setup, and that it's something that Richard has organized?
Maybe to make her do what she does at the end of the episode, which is go to him and cry about it and get him worked up about it. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean that could be it too, right? I don't know. I mean, either way seems likely to me. It could just be their people trying to warn her away. Because yeah, he's right. Like a normal woman would, or a normal person would just not be involved. Say, okay, forget it. But she's not. She's a courier. She works with the CIA, so she's gonna do something, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, you have to go and tell him this has happened. And I'm like, oh, okay. You want Nico to know this has happened.
Yeah.
Because then that's going to put him further against his own country, which you want. And it just made me think, I just don't trust them. They're spies. Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah, for sure.
So we get that, and then we get Ginny does the thing. And then we get the weirdest dinner date in history, which is Colette and 12-year-old Charlie, with he's got huge hair and huge teeth, and I'm sure he's grown into both, but just yeah. He's a fabulous looking 12-year-old, very interesting, and he takes her to this candlelit dinner with, and he's there regularly, obviously, because the maitre d' knows him. And he's like ordering bottles of wine, and like Colette's like, I will have a Chianti and you can maybe have a sip.
But did you get the feeling that he normally would like be served that wine? Like he's been there before and ordered wine, and the guy's like, yeah, no problem, here you go. Because I've known a lot of Italian people in my life, and they do like to drink at a young age. I remember going to a friend's house, a very Italian family, and I was like 13 years old. I'm like, have some wine. It's good for you. It's better than Coke. And he's like, he would like pour me a glass of wine. And that's very common. So they would not have any problem with serving a 12-year-old a glass of wine, I don't think.
And also a rich 12-year-old.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Who's probably been in there with his mum, who is a big patron of the restaurant and, whatever. So they'll just give him whatever he wants. It's fine. And they have a conversation, and I love it because he's that typical, and I remember being that kid that like, I want school to be over and I want to be a grown-up, and he says, because when you're a grown-up, no one can tell you what to do or where to go. And I'm like, that's literally all that happens when you're a grown-up. You get a job and someone tells you when you have to be somewhere and what you have to do when you get there. It's horrible.
Exactly it. Yeah, that's right. Don't be rushing too much. And then she basically tells him that, right? She's like, don't be, you'll get here soon enough. Don't be rushing to give this up. There's a lot of like, a lot of awesome things about being a kid as well. He's in a
the thing is, you can't tell a kid that. And I get it, because I was that kid. And if people are like, oh, no, it's not like that, you'd be like, oh, shut up. You're just trying to make it not. You just want me to go to school, so you're trying to make it sound shit to be a grown-up. But when I'm a grown-up, I can eat sweets as much as I like, and I can do this. And then you're like, no, you're a grown-up, and you're 25 years old, and you sleep wrong, and your neck's broken. Like, that's how it is. Mm-hmm. It's not, it's all sunshine and flowers. And then what does he do, Dan? I want you to say it because I can't say it.
What? He comes around and kisses her. He tells her to close her eyes, and she trusts him. She's so trusting. She thinks he's gonna do something, another magic trick or something like that, right? And he just comes right up to her and kisses her, plants one, and she, like, to give her credit, she's like, Charlie, no, like, she doesn't like. There's a couple different ways you could play that, right? You could just like be calm about it, but she like pushes him away. Actually pushes him away and says, Charlie, no. And then sits him down.
Yeah. And that, so I wrote down Charlie, ooh, and then we get another scene with Ginny, but I just want to carry on with the Charlie thing, because we see him it reminds me of the thing. We see him turning up at the hotel with a bunch of flowers to try and apologise.
Yeah.
And Colette is at the bar, and a man has approached her to offer her a cigarette. She is turning him down, but that's not what Charlie sees. He just sees her, and the man has his hand on her back, and she's like, and so he's like, oh no, yeah, rubbish. But it's the same bar where Laura went to earlier, because again, she's feeling very insecure in herself, and she gets all dolled up, which she doesn't need to do much. She's the most beautiful woman. And she turns up at the bar, and all these men start flocking to her, and she falls off her bar stool.
That's hilarious. That's
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And yeah, they established the Italian men are like just predators. They're just like, hello, good night. You're just like, they're all kind of like flocking around. That was so funny. So yeah, in that moment, and I'm like, Charlie, just stay there for a second more, and you'll see this guy walk away, and he's not picking up on her, but he doesn't. He just like immediately, because he's a 12-year-old, he doesn't stop to think. And so he immediately
Also,
runs off.
that is such a trope. You know, we've seen people of every age and every gender do that in every film and every TV show that's ever existed. It's just such a regular thing to miss the important part and walk away before it happens. And then she wakes up in the middle of the night and he is standing over her bed.
Oh my God. That's so,
with flowers,
so
which might not have happened if when she volunteered to take Charlie, because he didn't have a, what's the word? The
guardian?
Yes, guardian. He didn't have a guardian to fly with, and they weren't going to put him on the plane. And so Colette goes, oh, I'll take him. And the woman who was behind the desk was like, I was hoping you'd say that. And Colette goes, well, do you know what would be really nice if we all got our own rooms? Because the air stewardesses usually have to share.
Yes.
And the woman says, oh, I'll see what I can do. And Colette goes, I thought you'd say that. And so if she'd been sharing a room, this whole thing might not have happened.
Very true, yeah. But how did he get in there is my question. Because
he's like a gentleman thief. And I think of him as, To Catch a Thief. I think of him as like Cary Grant. It's like, he climbed up on the roof and he got down and he snuck his window.
Lock. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess so. He got in there, or maybe he even just got someone to let him in because he could have given a story about he's a kid and I lost my key and let me in. Like, he could have done that too. There's a number of different ways. But to wake up with somebody standing over you like that would be absolutely terrifying. I would be freaked the hell out. That's just...
I did it once. Somebody broke into my house when I was in London, and the way that our house, because it was one of these houses of multiple occupation, and they turned everything they possibly could into a bedroom, And so my bedroom was where, if you looked along the street, everybody's living room was. So I was essentially, so a guy broke in and opened my door, assuming that he'd be going into the living room, and I woke up and there was just a big looming shape over me. Wow. And I went, hello? And he ran away. So it all went, it was okay. But that happened at I think it was 10 to 4 in the morning. And for 3 years afterwards, I woke up at 10 to 4 every morning.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's not fun. And it's definitely not fun when it's a 12-year-old boy who kissed you earlier. That's definitely also, that's a whole other...
When you said I've done that, I thought you meant you've towered over somebody.
Oh, yeah. I'm 5'2". I have towered over nobody my entire life. So she, and they have another conversation. And there was a horrible moment where she was like, you close your eyes, I want to show you something. And I was like, if you kiss him, I'm gonna burn this whole thing to the ground. But luckily she didn't. Because she's sensible. And she shows him that she's kept the rose that he showed her on, that he magicked for her on the plane. They did the close-up magic in a really brilliant way. He'd go look here, and then he'd reach out of shot and pick something up, and I'm like, I don't even know if he's doing good magic, because they faked it all so badly. But when he did it on the plane, he stole a little bottle of alcohol, didn't he? From her tray, I think. And she was like, give it back. And then it was, because it was the guy next to him. And so the guy next to him is sitting there reading a newspaper, and Colette puts the little bottle of whatever it was back on his thing and says, watch out for him, he's trouble. And the guy is just like, I'm an extra and I don't have any lines and I'd better not react to anything. So he doesn't even go, He just doesn't, it's like he's in a completely different scene. It was hilarious. Charlie is really icky. And that's the end of that. That's the last we see of him. Thank God. But let's just go back to Ginny being at the hospital, and her VP man turns up.
Yeah.
And again, this comes up later. Laura, who is it? Is it Colette says to Maggie? Somebody says to Maggie, oh, yeah, Colette, because Ginny tells her that Maggie... Yeah. And that had happened the episode before. And so Colette says to her, oh, congratulations on keeping your job. But this is 5 episodes later now, so doesn't make any sense. But the guy turns up, the VP, so he knows about, Ginny and Dean. And he's mad about it. And I hate, he has a wife. And he is cheating on his wife with Ginny. But the idea that Ginny might cheat on him, that's outrageous.
Yeah, I get the feeling he was used to it. It sounds like it had happened before. He kind of gave.
Well, he does say you're not the first, but he's obviously like, I get 2 women, but she doesn't get to have 2 men. Like,
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, hypocrite. I mean, you're already a hypocrite. You're awful, man. But no, that's just one of my real pet peeves about these kind of plots.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Get this.
I didn't like that guy. Like, he just shows up and he's kind of like, but why is he there? Like, he says he loves her, so it's just such a weird relationship that they have, right? Him and Ginny, because he did say he loved her, right, at some point, and he said that's fine. I don't, right? And the Dean's like, good, because I don't.
Yes,
right?
You can have her. I don't want her.
Yeah,
please take her.
Yeah.
And yeah. But she just, like, Ginny is just doing that thing where she's like, he says he loves me, so why won't he leave his wife?
Right, yes. And that's, again, this is something this guy's doing where he doesn't want
Well, at some point, love, you have to make the decision that he's just not going to leave his wife, and you are worth more than that. Like, please realise that at some point, But obviously she like sends him a cable or something, I think. And that's how he ends up there.
And he had to fly TWA. Oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah, doesn't even get to fly Pan Am. And then at the end, we see that Colette's like, oh, well, they're together now. And I'm like, yeah, but still, is he leaving his wife?
Who cares? And honestly, again, like I said, I didn't even notice Ginny was gone after she was gone in the regular episode. So this does seem like a lot of extra. And like I said, I do think this pushes Dina and Colette further apart, because at the end of the episode, she's kind of like, she has to flatly say to him, or say to her, to Ginny, that there's nothing involved. And so that kind of like sets them out of like I think it resets the relationship a bit, and that even though if they have had some flirtatious moments, they have to kind of build that again.
Yeah, and also like, because Charlie says something to her, I can't remember what it was that he actually said, but it leads her to that sort of, oh no, it's Ginny. I've been in the situation that I've loved someone who doesn't love me. And then the very last thing we see in the episode, which seems like such an odd shot to end it with, is Colette in a bath. And nothing happens. It's just, that's the final thing we see. Yeah. And then it cuts to credits. Really weird. And I wonder if that, again, I can't quite remember how quickly she and Dean then got together, but whether there's this idea that she is alone, and that's the thing we're meant to be focusing on, that
I think so.
She doesn't move anybody. Yeah. That she's like in a bath, having a lovely time. She's got a glass of wine and a book. Don't know how these people read books in baths. You're going to get your book wet. And, and so she's sort of like, okay, on her own. But we as an audience are like, oh, look, she's on her own. So there's definitely sort of a lead in to her maybe becoming a couple with somebody.
Yeah.
But when you put the episode out of order, it's just Colette in a bath.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's interesting to me. This came at a time when TV was changing, and that like there used to be a time where you could, again, Perfect Strangers. I'm also watching like Murder, She Wrote, and those episodes are out of order. They're all so self-contained. They can air out of order, and it doesn't matter. But when this aired in 2011, TV shows were becoming more serialized, more connected to episodes led into each other. Things happen that you had to know for the next thing to happen, and this just demonstrates how much this show depended on that, and how bringing this episode out of order just messes it all up.
Yeah.
Right.
So, again, if we'd watched this episode in the right place, I don't think we'd have disliked it as much as we do.
Probably not. Yeah, it was fine. It was not. Again, I think it was like the worst of the entire. I mean, we haven't seen the last one yet, but it's not a good episode as far as like just general storytelling goes. And I think, yeah, but I think it would have been fine. I would have been okay with everything because it would have made more sense. Everything would have been like, oh, okay. And like I said, in some cases, this would have built. It would have built like things for Laura. It would have helped her character grow more. We did, by the way, get the final. That was towards the end as well.
Yes.
For
Yes.
the guy, and I don't think like he turned out to be not a creep. I totally thought he was a creep at first when they were in the thing. And he was like, showing her the dark room and making his moves, and then she said no. And as soon as she said no, he was fine. Like I was like, oh shit, this guy's okay. So like he didn't try and push it any further than that. So I thought that was okay. But then he sold her photos. He took the photos and sold them. And it didn't sound like they had much of a conversation ahead of that, right? It's like she shows up, boom, drops the clothes, let's do it. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I can kind of see why he would have thought that she was okay with him selling them. Because when she said in Truth or Dare, she was like, I did a naked photo shoot. I thought it was like the guy, from Life magazine, and they'd sort of been fooling around, and he'd ended up taking some naughty photos of her, But she has seen his work, she knows this is what he does, and then she walks into his apartment and says, let's do that. I can see why he thought he had her consent to sell them, and they definitely should have had a contract and worked this out. But yes, I thought they were taken in a very different context than how they were. So when I saw them in that art gallery, I was horrified, and I'm still horrified. Obviously, what he did was terrible. You ask someone if you can do this. You don't make assumptions. But having seen it in context, I understand it a little more, why that miscommunication happened.
Absolutely. So that's it, eh? That's it for episode 13.
And I don't know. Matt has been in here, and I don't know if Matt is still here. But no, I have not had the time to. I've not had the chance to watch anything that you've recommended. But I do have them on a list, and I will at some point watch them. But I've got some family stuff going on at the moment, which is why I'm with my mom. So I don't have the time. I'm literally kind of just watching Pan Am.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, this week that was pretty much all I watched. Because my dad's been in hospital and he's come out now, so now my dad's home, so like we're all just getting settled into how things are working. And so it's like, when Matt sent me this great list of films and TV shows to watch, Irish films and TV shows, and I have unfortunately not yet had the time.
It reminds me though, something I did watch that I'm going to make a video about later today is Gladiator 2. Have you seen Gladiator 2?
No, I saw Gladiator 1 and I was not a fan of it, so I don't think I was ever going to.
You might not like this one either because it is more of that. But the guy who plays the gladiator, now I'm thinking, I can't remember his name, but he's also Irish. And I was like, yes, that's it. Yes. And he was really good. Like I was like, oh shit, this guy's good. He's going to be somebody. I think we're going to see him in other stuff. And
he's already huge. Did you not know him before this? Because
no, I never heard of him.
Massive over here.
Oh no, never heard of him before. So this I guess is his big breakthrough into North America then, because it's a big Hollywood movie. It's nominated for Oscars and that kind of stuff. I thought it was pretty good. It was confusing at times and a bit unrealistic, I think, but whatever. That's Hollywood. And I didn't like Denzel's character. I thought Denzel, I mean, he's not doing his normal stuff. He's doing completely different things, but it's like, what is that choice about? Like the little like quirky things he does with his character. It's a little strange. But overall it was fine. It was a good movie. It's an entertaining movie, but if you didn't like it, what didn't you like about it? Was like the gory violence? Was that the part that you didn't like?
No, that's never a problem for me.
It's a lot of that.
It's Russell Crowe.
Oh, really?
I'm just not. I have seen one performance by Russell Crowe that I enjoyed. And that was Proof of Life with Meg Ryan, I think.
I don't think I've seen that one.
And I am Maximus Decimus Meridius, father of oh my god, I don't care. And I just think I think I just found it sort of overblown, and it was at that time, and it was probably the sort of start of that swords and sandals epidemic that we had.
There was a bit of a trend. Yes, absolutely. I've got a couple other movies actually.
Yeah, so like Troy and Kings of Egypt, Gods of Egypt, Kings of Gods. I can't remember what that was.
Gods of Egypt, yeah, Gods of Egypt, and Alexander.
Yeah, and so I saw Gladiator, and then I saw Troy, and Troy just makes me laugh so much because I always talk about how Sean Bean's in it, and everyone is doing like their accents. They're all doing like an RP British accent. They're all trying to just sound, standard English, and in the way that they're the same way that there is standard American, and then you get like Sean Bean, who is trying really hard but is still definitely from Sheffield.
You just can't do it. That's hilarious.
And I think Peter O'Toole is in it, and I think he maybe has. Is it him? And he has some scenes with Orlando Bloom, or whether they're never in the same shot, but like Orlando Bloom is desperately trying to do like Shakespearean acting, and then you have this like legendary actor just wiping the floor with him without even trying, and I was just like, I don't like this.
I don't have to watch it. I have it on DVD. I might watch it. So I'm going to do Gladiator 2, so I might do like other movies like that this week, and I might watch some other like
Swords and Sandals.
What would you say? Oh, yeah, Swords and Sandals is what you would call that category.
Yes, epics. Sword and sandal epics, I think, was sort of how they were referred to in like Empire magazine over here, and that's what I was reading at the time. So
there's a new one coming out, eh? There's a new Odyssey that Christopher Nolan, I think, is directing.
Yes.
I heard that. I don't remember who's in it.
Yes. Is it Christopher Nolan doing it? But yes, I had heard that. So we've got Gladiator 2, and now we've got let's not have another sword and sandals moment,
I don't know that it will, because Gladiator 2, I don't know how well it did in the theaters. Like, I know that it's nominated for Oscars and it's a big deal and everything, but Hollywood has changed a lot since that last trend. I don't know that those trends really happen anymore, right? They don't make enough of these movies for there to be a trend.
Yeah, we're still stuck in the superhero trend. We're still there.
Yeah, that's right.
Working our way through that one, But when you say then it's nominated for Oscars, is it mostly technical?
I think so. And Best Picture, though, it is nominated for Best Picture.
Is it? Because the only thing I heard about, because I don't get to the cinema, so I don't see films for a long time after they've come out. And the main thing I seems to hear about it was that it was the same film. Like it
is a little bit. Yeah, it's very similar. There's some elements, like I think it's actually kind of clever what they did to tie it into the first one. But for a big chunk of it, it does feel like, well, this is just the same movie again. It does. Yeah. There's definitely like they're trying to do at least parallels, but it does feel like it's like kind of like the Star Wars movie, the Force Awakens, which does that same thing for the first Star Wars movie, but a lot of people feel like it's just a remake of Star Wars, right? It doesn't really do enough on its own to differentiate itself from the original. I think this one does, barely. There's a few things, but it's very similar to the original for sure.
Yeah. And just remind me, is Perfect Stranger the Bronson Pinchot one?
Yes.
Because I just a couple of days ago on my TikTok, an interview with Bronson Pinchot turned up, and he was like, "And this is how I got a Perfect Stranger." And I was like, "Wait a second, I know this."
Was that the one about where he got? That was the same day celebrity, where the car full of people drove up and approached him the day that Beverly Hills Cop came out?
Yes, the Beverly Hills thing. Yeah.
That role made him a star. That Surge role that he did for Beverly Hills Cop, and he said, "Yeah, from that he got Perfect Strangers," and that was like 7-8 years of the sitcom.
Yes. Hey, we've got the same For You page.
We do. I'm not surprised at all, Kara.
Yeah. I'm not. Okay. Well, next week is
definitely the final episode. No chance of it being out of order this time, so we definitely know.
Yeah.
It's gonna be.
If it turns out to be the pilot, I'm gonna throw some stuff. But no, because I think the next episode is called 1964, and I think it's sort of like the fallout from the Kennedy assassination and like just where that sort of leaves the characters. But yeah, that's the final one. I'm just going to have to watch everything else that the actress, I can't remember what her name is, Colette's actress did. I'm just going to have to stalk her elsewhere. And then, I mean, the only good thing about Pan Am ending, the only thing that will save me is 911 will be back.
Yeah. There we go.
The stupid firefighter show, which is going to seem even more ridiculous after this.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to like just kind of enjoying the silliness of it and not getting so worked up about things. But I think, is it like, and now it's coming back for a straight run till the end of the season? Is that what's going to happen?
I mean, yes, this is season 8B, as they call it, but I don't know. We might have like a random week off. Sometimes they do.
When the Oscars are on or something like that.
Yeah, when the Oscars are on. Yeah, they do, because they're not stupid.
Well, but they did put some episodes out of order, though, didn't they do that last season? You said something like that. Or was it a scene? It was a scene.
Yes, it was a scene that they put into an episode in this season that they'd filmed last season. Right. But they made it part of this season because, as I pointed out at the time, the only difference we had was that in season 7 Eddie didn't have a moustache, and in the season 8A he did, and so they CGI'd a moustache on him in all but one scenes, in all but one shot, just one where he walks in the background and they forgot to put the caterpillar on his upper lip, but they did at least still make it like it wasn't just like a random episode that they just shoved in out of order.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, all right. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to the last episode of Pan Am. I'm again. This has been a lot of fun. I think anybody who likes this kind of stuff should watch the show. I think it's a great little 14 episode thing to watch. Right? You could watch it in a weekend, really. If you binged it.
Yeah, you could. You could absolutely binge this really nicely. And I think our general idea about the show will finally fall into place when we've seen the last episode, because it might ruin everything, because we might be like, oh, they ended it here and it could have had so much more to go, or like, oh, this actually kind of works. So I'm looking forward to finding out how they left it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, well, this was marvellous as ever, and I will see you next week for 1964.
See you later.
Bye.